18th, 2023 to order for the San Mateo County Harbor District Board of Harbor Commissioners. Can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Zemke?
Here.
Commissioner Matoush?
Here.
Commissioner Jane Crawley? Commissioner Slater Carter? Present. Commissioner Dalmarat?
Here. Okay. Just one short announcement before we begin that due to cases of Zoom bombing occurring with local agencies, a decision has been made to not allow Zoom comments. However, as noted in the agenda, comments can still be provided for a meeting beforehand and distributed to the commissioners ahead of time. Moving on to public comments, do we have members of the public are still allowed to provide comments in person at the meeting? Do we have anybody here that would like to make a public comment on an item which is not on the agenda? Okay.
I would like to ask for a board-adopted policy on Zoom policies. Half Moon Bay is developing one. Water and Sand is developing one. Sewer Authority Mid-Coast is developing one. I think this, the first word that came to mind is unsociable, but I won't use that. It's too weak. Nasty, disgusting, invasive, off-topic behaviors. Need
Commissioner Slater Carter, if I can interrupt.
We need to have a policy developed at the board.
That's item number 6 of today's agenda.
Oh, sorry,
We will discuss that on discussion item number 6.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Today. Okay, well, I guess that moves us into commissioner comments.
That's my commissioner comment.
Anyone else of the commission would like to make a comment today?
I've been approached by some of the commercial fishermen that are still having a great deal of difficulty getting ice. It's curtailing their ability to go out and make money. I don't know of the update, but somehow I'd like to see something done for the sake of our commercial fishermen.
Okay.
And then just a brief comment. I've been hearing from people at the store, shopping, whoever I know who are friends of the harbor, who want to eat at the harbor. They're getting, but there's a lot of misinformation. There's one friend of mine, he's saying, oh, we heard that you're going to build a 4-story restaurant bar complex. Oh my gosh. So I don't know how often. I guess they can take a look at our notes. They ought to be seeing but there may be something we can do with an updated information as to what we plan to do over the next few years in the replacement of that area.
That's another agenda item today. We're talking about
That is, so stay tuned.
Stay tuned, yeah.
Oh, I have one more comment.
Yes.
On November 18th, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., Sewer Authority Mid-Coast is having an open house. The public is all invited. Kids are welcome. Dogs on leash are welcome. If you want to see what happens after you flush your toilet or run stuff down your sinks, and also learn about what Sewer Authority Mid-Coast is doing in anticipation of a very heavy winter storm system this year. Last year, we came within 1.5 inches of losing the entire sewer plant for the entire coast side, which had we lost it, it would have been due to electrical failures. We could have lost crew. And we also, had that plant gone out, we would have had to evacuate the coast for goodness knows how long until the plant is replaced. So I recommend everybody come, thank the crew for their marvelous work, and learn about one of the most important environmental facilities on the coast side.
Where is this located?
It is located in Half Moon Bay, and you'll have to go to Sewer Authority Mid-Coast side, Sam Cleans Water, to get the exact directions.
Location, okay.
Because you get off the highway at Kehoe, and then you take a short left, and then you take a long right to the plant at the end of the road, and it's called Bev Cunha Road.
That brings us to activity reports. Jim, would you like to start off on this?
I'm currently down in San Diego at the Maritime Recreational Association Conference. And I'll report out on that once I get back to Half Moon Bay. Nothing else significant to report out to the board or the public at this time, besides what's in my report.
Okay. All right, we'll move on to operations.
Nothing significant at either facility. Pillar Point Harbor has been very busy of late due to the Pumpkin Festival in Half Moon Bay. It was a very, very busy weekend, but nothing occurred of significance. I will mention that Ben Andrews, one of our deputy harbor masters, received a call and got a little letter of appreciation from the transient vessel that was transiting down to Mexico, stopped at our in our outer harbor and had a medical condition, and Ben Andrews was able to actually transport the medical professionals, fire, ambulance out on our vessel so that he could get assistance. So, yeah, very appreciative of that. We've got maintaining still 90% occupancy at Pillar Point Harbor. Likewise, the occupancy is great at Oyster Point as well. We're still hovering around 80%, 79%. Staff at Oyster Point are continuing, led by Assistant Harbor Master Jacob Walding and Harbor Master James Smith, to work on the docks and the electrical, trying to remove all of the water that's accumulated over decades, making the docks float more evenly. So they've been doing an excellent job there. And obviously everybody knows that we just had, at the end of last month, had another successful Mavericks Festival. We are hearing some challenges from some, like the bait shop, for instance, which the bait shop lessee, Jerry, I spoke with her quite a while this morning, actually. She's going to be making some recommendations for some fine tweaking for our next year's permit to make it even better. But other than that, it was, I think it was, I went Sunday myself to the festival, and it was very well attended, and I think it's only going to get better as the years go on. I've got nothing more.
Thanks to our staff to help make those events come across flawlessly. Administration and Finance, Julie.
Morning, President Zemke, Commissioners. We finalized a contract with a new auditor, Nigro, after we've received 3 quotes from the auditing firms, and we chose the lowest cost option for that. We began a process to implement which will assist the district in ensuring that budget document continue to meet the GFOA recommended practices. And we're working on updating many of the policies and procedures. Thank you.
Activity reports. Okay, any comments from the staff? I mean, from the commissioners on the activity reports? Okay, we will move along to the consent calendar.
Motion to approve items 1 through 6.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we approve items 1 through 6 on the consent calendar. Can we have a roll call, please?
Zemke,
Yes.
Mr. Damrat,
Yes.
Mr. Matoush,
Yes.
Mr. Slater Carter.
Yes.
Moving along to Discussion item number 1, Surfers Beach replenishment pilot project update. Mr. Moran.
Good morning again, Commissioners. This is a recommendation staff for the board to receive a presentation and discuss opportunities for outreach and community involvement in the Surfers Beach Pilot Restoration Project, as the board directed last month, for us to have an update on these efforts, and authorize an amendment to the contract with consultant Brad Damitz for an amount not to exceed $38,400 for continued interim project management, increase in capital expenditure appropriations of this amount to be funded by available working capital. We've got our consultant Brad Damitz has been working for 8 years on this Surfers Beach project for the district. He's with us today to give us an update on these public outreach efforts, and also to answer any questions with regard to his proposal for an amendment for the additional $38,400 so he can continue his work on Surfers Beach. Brad?
Thanks, John. Hi, Commissioners. Let me just share my screen here. I've got it. Okay. Okay, here we go. Yeah, John, can everybody hear me? John?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So John and Jim asked me to kind of put together a brief presentation and overview about what some of the current plans are for public outreach and community involvement in the Surfers Beach project, and then to also think ahead, kind of brainstorm some other ideas that we could possibly pursue, for the public outreach and community involvement. So I'd like to just kind of get into the presentation here. Okay, as usual, I just like to start these presentations with a quick orientation in case there's anybody who's not familiar with the project. But the Surfers Beach Pilot Restoration Project is located in Pillar Point Harbor, and the basic idea of the project is to move sand that has accumulated inside of the harbor because of the outer breakwaters, and move those to Surfers Beach, which is just outside of the harbor and adjacent to the outer breakwater. So the project is aimed at addressing two major issues. The first one is exacerbated severe coastal erosion rates along Surfers Beach that have been apparent, since the outer breakwaters were built in the early 60s. And the other issue that the project will address is shoaling. It's the addition of sand inside the harbor that gets trapped in the harbor and interferes with navigation, use of the boat launch ramps, and that sort of stuff. And the harbor district is important to point out that, they have a mandate and responsibility to protect that harbor of refuge and provide a safe anchorage for vessels. So, real quick project overview. As I mentioned, we're going to remove that clean sand from inside the harbor and hydraulically pump it over to Surfers Beach to create a new beach profile. And we anticipate the following outcomes. Firstly, to improve navigation conditions inside the harbor at the boat launch ramp and throughout that East Basin, improve impaired public access at the beach and down to the beach, along the beach at Surfers Beach, mitigate recreational impacts, mitigate damages from coastal storms by providing a buffer so the waves aren't crashing straight up against the Highway 1 and the revetment, and to create new beach habitat and ecological benefits, at least for a temporary basis. So, starting with some of the current plans for public outreach and involvement, I'd just like to start by saying it is a large construction project that involves, dredging, pumping of sand, water, mixture, slurry, heavy equipment, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of things that the general public can't be involved in as far as implementing the project itself. But there's a lot of ways that we can involve the public in other aspects of the project. And I kind of broke it down public outreach I see as just keeping the general public and the local community informed about the project, what's happening, what it is trying to address, scheduling, impacts to public access, all kinds of things like that. And then involvement would be opportunities for maybe some volunteers or classroom teachers and students being involved in certain aspects of the project. So, as far as the current plans, there's not a whole lot, but we do have plans to continue doing public outreach presentations at board meetings as we regularly do. And as I usually would do is provide more of a background about the project status and that kind of thing. Today is a little bit more focused. We had an update presentation last month. So just to continue these presentations on a regular basis throughout the planning, pre-construction, construction, post-construction. The second thing would be similar to what we did with the West Trail Living Shoreline is to create some interpretive signage and do an extensive amount of outreach during the project. And if you remember with the Living Shoreline project, that one had a much larger impact on public access. It was work occurring along a heavily used trail. There's a lot more kind of hand-holding and outreach that needed to be done around that to ensure the safety and access of the public. We see a similar effort for this one. If you look to the bottom right in the slide, that's just an example of a big sign that we had up in the parking lot to inform people about kind of what's happening with the construction. And we'll do something similar for Surfers Beach. But as well as that, just sending out a series of regular emails through the Harbor District's existing outreach mechanism, social media platforms, website, email, that kind of thing, just to inform about the project schedule and what's happening. So everybody will be in the loop on that. And then the third thing is more of a public involvement element of the project. And it's partially required by permit conditions, but we are coming up with a program that's a little bit more involved than what is required. And that would be a post-construction surfing conditions monitoring program. So what we want to do is kind of determine what types of effects the placement of sand at Surfers Beach has on the quality of the surfing at Surfers Beach. And we plan on doing that a few ways. Firstly, we'd like to do have a couple of workshops with the local community, surfing community, including Surfrider Foundation, some of the local surf schools, and come up with some forms that volunteer surfers can fill out. And you can see on the bottom left, there's an image. It might be hard to see, but that's.
Hey, can you hear us? Brad, we can't. Brad, can you hear us?
Yes.
Can't hear you. You're blocked. You just cut out, and we missed everything you said for the last 1 minute.
1 minute.
Can you just call in or something?
Yeah.
Or get on a more stable internet connection?
Yeah.
Yes.
On our side.
I can't
Oh,
tell.
we're thinking it's on our side, Brad. Sorry.
Okay, let me try my AirPods. That might help with the sound. I think my internet connection should be stable.
Yeah, I think it's on our side. I'm understanding. All right,
Okay.
we got you right now. Keep going.
Okay, I'm going to keep going then. Okay, so I don't know how much you missed. I think you heard the part about the interpretive signage and the outreach through the Harbor District's email list, social media, and website. The next one would be to develop a surfing conditions monitoring program that involves input from volunteers, from surfers who are actually out there at Surfers Beach, experiencing the waves. And we've developed a surfing conditions monitoring form in the draft adaptive management plan. You can see on the left-hand side, there's an image of that form. And some of the information that would be collected is, about the quality of the waves, the direction, the length, a number of objective and subjective kind of data collection that would then be analyzed to help assess surfing conditions. And in order to kind of foster the involvement and relationships with the surfing community, we're proposing to host 2 public workshops to obtain input about how to kind of create these forms, but also to provide outreach and information about the project itself. And what we'll end up with is a program where local surfers, when they go out and surf at Surfers Beach, they can fill out this form and submit it, and then we can analyze those forms and compile them and be able to assess how the project has affected surfing conditions. And I always like to say that we expect that it will improve the surfing conditions through the placement of sand, at least on a temporary basis. So those are the main ones that are being planned. And then there's a few additional ideas that I've provided. And I reached out to a few colleagues up and down the state and kind of to get some thoughts on if anybody had some ideas. I got a few good ones. So the first one is something that I thought of, which is, we're always giving these brief presentations at the Board of Harbor Commissioners meetings, and I'm trying to get up tons of information in a short amount of time. The idea here would be to host a public workshop meeting or two to provide more detailed information so we could really get into the nitty gritty about, the engineering and design, construction techniques, the history of the site and the issues there, the eelgrass mitigation plan, because that's a huge part of the project, physical and biological monitoring, just kind of have a little bit more time, not a full day workshop or something, but maybe a couple hours where we could get a little bit more into detail, maybe in the evening where people are more available to attend these public events. The second one, which I'll give you some more details in some following slides, but just to introduce it now, would be some sort of what they call a citizen science monitoring effort to assist with some of the monitoring of the project after we place the sand at Surfers Beach. And there's some existing platforms such as CoastSnap, which I'm going to explain in a few minutes, that could be used really successfully, I think, in this project. The next one, which I'm also just introducing here and will provide some more details in a couple slides, is to plant some specifically selected native plants and create a seed feeder beach. And more about that in a minute. As far as eelgrass mitigation, some of the commissioners at the last meeting brought up the idea of possibly having some community volunteers assisting with that process. And there's some limitations there. I mean, a lot of the eelgrass that's going to be planted will be in, from -3 to -7 mean lower water depth. So you can't really have people out there doing that work, but there is a role. I talked to our eelgrass biologist, and he said that, a good volunteer role in the process is after the biologists go out and collect the eelgrass plants, they need to be bundled. So each of the individual turions, that they call them, bundled about 5 or 6 of them together, tied, and then the biologists go out and plant those out in the newly constructed eelgrass mitigation platform. So there's a role there for potentially a classroom type of activity or volunteer to assist the eelgrass biologists in kind of that process. It's a small role, but it would definitely be a help and a good opportunity for people to learn and get involved in that aspect of the project. The next one is just simply to, prepare a media release, a press release, and have a ribbon cutting ceremony at the boat launch ramp or maybe at Surfers Beach once the project is completed to kind of get some outreach out there, get some information, maybe some articles so people are aware of the project and what it intends to accomplish. And then finally, something that we do, like for example, with the West Trail project, is to host some small group tours of the project site. And I think during the construction project is a great process is a great time to do that. We would probably do one for the permitting agencies who are often, not that familiar with how these projects on the ground actually happen. So it would be good to get them some hands-on experience to see how this project works, but also maybe some local elected officials and members of the community who might be interested in seeing what the Harbor District is accomplishing on this project. And the idea there is just to kind of provide some outreach and hands-on kind of observations of how it works, but also to get some possibly get some involvements from some of the other partners that we have that would benefit from these type of projects, like the county and the city of Half Moon Bay and Caltrans. So back to this idea of the citizen science monitoring, there is an app out there called CoastSnap. And I'm just going to read this first bullet here from their website. CoastSnap is a global citizen science network that harnesses your snaps to capture changing coastlines. Our beaches are constantly evolving. By contributing photo, you will help record short and long-term beach erosion and recovery over time. CoastSnap will help us better understand beach processes and contributing factors. So the idea here, if you look at the photos, there are these things that they call cradles, right? So you would put your phone sideways in that cradle with the camera not on zoom, just on a regular setting, and take a photo. And then you can submit that photo, and it goes into a database. You can submit the photo either by downloading the app or clicking on taking a photo of the QR code that's on the signage. And then it will give you directions on how to submit that. So what does it do? So after the picture is taken using the cradle, then it gets sent to a database, and the images can be analyzed, and they can actually extract the shoreline location data from the images. And you can look at how that's changing over time. From the reason the cradle is there is to keep a consistent, identical vantage point. So you can compare things apples to apples and be able to tell how the beach is evolving. That would be interesting for Surfers Beach because it would give us a good idea of how long the sand remains on the beach. You can do things like create time lapses of all the photos, put them together and see how things change. This uses a process called photogrammetry, and where they take a 2D image and create a kind of three-dimensional view of the beach. And each pixel in that image gets mapped to GPS coordinate. So they can also account for the tidal changes using the timestamp on the phone and the GPS coordinate information. That's kind of a real quick, this is something that's been used very successfully down in Southern California. They've had some beaches that have been monitored for 20 years now using this technique. It's just something to consider. I would need to kind of look into it and talk to some people who run these programs to figure out exactly what it takes. But there's an existing mechanism through that app that could be used. I think it would take a little bit of post-processing, data analysis, but nothing too extravagant that would allow the results. And it's just kind of a neat thing from what I've seen. And it gets rave reviews from people who have run these programs. This one here, unfortunately, is supposed to be an animation that shows a time lapse, and it shows how the beach width is evolving over time between the winters and summers and stuff. And it's not working, but imagine that. And then the second idea that I received, and this was from Dr. Peter Bay, who's local. A lot of people know him. He's the guy who kind of put together the native planting program for the West Trail Living Shoreline, and I worked on several other projects with Peter. But he had this idea. So we kind of agreed that the duration of the sand that's placed on the beach is not going to be long enough to really have a full native plant restoration project at Surfers Beach in the traditional sense. But if you could take some of these native plants, native perennials that are short-lived and adapted to living in highly erosive kind of open coast environments, they have strategies to put out just a ton of seeds and disperse those seeds down the coast so that they can become established, down coast. So the idea here would be to raise some native perennials, such as pink sand for being a beach saltbush. This could be done as part of a student classroom experiment. These are species that are pretty easy to raise. You can actually seed them in a sandbox and raise them to the stage where they can be transplanted. And then what they would do is provide what we are calling a seed feeder beach that would provide an abundance of seeds that would go down the coast. Right now, there is not a good population of these species because a lot of the upcoast area is heavily armored. So we think that by planting these seeds, even in the short term, even if the sand only remains on the beach, for 5 years, we could still have a success in helping the down coast beaches with native plant restoration. And we had a really successful effort with the local school at the West Trail Living Shoreline doing native plant restoration. And we foresee this could be a similar project, on a volunteer basis. So, those are kind of the quick ideas. There's not a whole lot of them. I kind of envision this agenda item as more of a discussion, brainstorming session than anything definitive. But I presented my ideas, and I think it's time for questions and then to reach out to harbor commissioners and hear some other ideas that you might have and discuss them.
I'll add to that we've obviously not yet got all the permitting, et cetera, in line in order for us to even put out a invitation for bid for the actual contractor to come on board that will actually be doing all of this work for us. Once we have done that, and we've got those set of professionals on board with us, they too will be brainstorming with us to come up with other ideas as well to involve the community in the hands-on parts of this. And then Brad, do you want to mention or talk about a little bit more about what you're going to be doing for these additional monies that we're asking the board to consider?
Yeah, I mean, that, sure. Let me share my screen and I can show you a more detailed view of that. One second here. And in the meantime, any thoughts on the any of those ideas that I brought up? Worth pursuing, maybe worth gathering some more information on?
Since we have a lull here, George, you had a comment?
Yeah, in full disclosure, prior to becoming one of the harbor commissioners, I was working closely with Brad on a lot of these ideas, and he knows my philosophy of this. This is a demonstration program, but it's also a great natural laboratory for the community to see how things are going on. So a lot of these things we talked about over the years, is now embedded in a lot of this. We talked about specific tours for specific groups. So I would see a tour during construction that would be for some of our county and state politicians. I would see a tour specifically to some of our scientists and engineers who are going to be looking at other things. So I think a lot of these things can be done. Brad mentioned the CoSNAP. Corps of Engineers for like 30 or 40 years had a similar program, but there were no cell phones at the time. We had pieces of paper. And it was called the Littoral Environment Observer. And it actually did a lot of the same things, but it had people go out and do it. So we gave them a piece of paper that had the protractor, and they can kind of line it up and see what direction the waves were coming from. We had them mark a couple of spaces, like a 50-yard distance on the beach, throw a grapefruit in, and then time it how long it takes that gets the currents flowing. We had a lot of visual observations of the community of the waves, and that was kind of interesting and controversial because a lot of people will estimate it a lot of different ways. But if you get enough people, you get a pretty good sense of what's going on. And if we have surfers looking at it, they're going to be really looking at the breaker height and breaker quality, and that's important here. And so all these things we can blend together to get maximum community involvement. The critical thing is there's kind of two phases to this monitoring. Since it is a demonstration, there's certain groups that are going to be looking for certain things, like the marine sanctuaries, the scientists, the engineers are going to be looking at specific data that's going to be more so than what we would have community people collect. So there will be a monitoring program as part of that that's going to look at more scientific data that can then definitively say something about, how that, system is working, how long does it last, a lot of these things. So that's, I'm sure that's going to be built into the program also. So I think we're on track to get some good things, and we need to take advantage for our local community schools and try to build them into this as much as possible, because it's a great way to have the community involved and have them do some of the measurements and stuff like that. So I think we're on good footing here and where we need to go.
And Brad and I have already discussed as well that many of these ideas, and obviously we've got the notes of your ideas right now, if there's any that Brad hadn't already wanted to incorporate. But once we do the invitation for bid, we will put those as line items that the winning contractor bid on.
Because there may be some things, like you were saying, in the permit that may require certain elements to be collected also. So we may not know that. We probably have an idea what that is. The critical thing about bringing politicians onto the tour is not for them to see sand getting pumped out of a pipe. Well, okay, well, that's fun for me anyway, to see. The critical thing is, again, this is a demonstration, short-term, it's going to be short-lived. We need to start building what the future is going to be for that area. And typically in most of our minds, if the sediment works, that is kind of part of that solution. The harbor only has a little bit of sediment for that. Okay, so the thing is, where will sediment come from in the future? Like a million cubic yards every 5 to 8 years. That would then be the number to help keep stability there. Where's that going to come from? That's the big challenge, and that's why now we have to build in the politics to have them primed for what we're going to need to do for this thing to go 20, 30, 40 years.
Especially since Surfers Beach is not actually on district property.
Yeah.
And we'll need their support in getting financial assistance.
That would be state and county then.
Yes, that's true. So the county we need to embrace them and work closely together with them, because we do have, that relationship together. So that's going to be important for them.
And what I hear you saying is through the Army Corps of Engineers, there is strong historic documentation on sediment flow and settling and waves.
They have collected quite a bit of data. The other thing, I spoke with one of the Corps members just yesterday. Over the years, they were always proposing that when this starts to get constructed, that they would assist in monitoring and doing data. Well, because of the delay, they have not been requesting that money over the last 3 years. But I will make a call to the district and say, we're looking at, and Brad, correct me if I'm wrong if you hear me, we're looking at the Surfer Beach portion to be going in the spring and summer of 25. So 24, we're going to be doing the eelgrass and doing that. But I believe the sediments portion for the beach will be coming in 25. Is that correct, Brad?
No, we're going to do it all in one fell swoop. So starting
all
with
in one?
eelgrass.
Okay, well, that's good to know. I'm not sure, the Corps always has to plan 1 or 2 years in advance, whether they have the opportunity to request some money. There could be excess money. It's coming from a national program called RSM, or Regional Sediment Management, and they have a lump of money. If we can get to them early enough, then maybe they will have some funds to be able to participate in some of the more detailed monitoring at the end of the summer then next year.
And the monitoring will be years after the project's completed anyway. So
Well, it's kind of, it begins before you even put sand there, because you want to have, well, what's the present condition now? Then you do the construction, you do some monitoring construction, but then post-construction, how it's responding. It's kind of those 3 phases.
I think it will be lasting for years.
Correct.
after.
Yeah, 5 years is what we're proposing.
Yes.
So including the commercial fishermen and the recreational community, fishing, boating community is also important, not only for data collection, but for comments on how they think this will affect their access to the harbor, because although I love the idea of a demonstration project, we're a commercial harbor. And we can't ever diminish our mission statement.
That's true. And
From that Anchorage area shouldn't negatively impact, or definitely would only benefit any voters.
directly from the harbor's perspective, we are really a benefit to the county because we have a source of sediment for them to use. We need to get rid of the sediment. The fishing industry doesn't want to be, dragging their anchors inside the harbor or running aground.
Right.
So for us, it's about getting rid of the sediment in a beneficial way. And, we've been trying this for 20 years to do it, and we haven't been successful till now. So that's from our perspective, we're on the good side of this whole thing, that we want to take that material that we have to get rid of anyway and use it beneficially. So for us, it's a win-win.
I think it's important to put that kind of statement and maybe quotes from fishermen, recreational and commercial, into our public relations efforts to show that we have that support.
I think that's a great idea.
Because there are naysayers who will be creating, making their best efforts to create controversy. So we need to think
Always true.
in advance of how to make them less likely to succeed. Installing things.
Brett, were you able to get your proposal up? Your amendment proposal?
Yeah, I'm just referring to it. Do you want me to put it up? It's kind of a lot of, let me just give you
If you
the,
want to just briefly go over it, that's fine as well.
sure.
I don't know,
okay. Yeah, let's
seem
just
to-
go over it. It's a lot of individual tasks, but I'll give you the main categories. So this proposal is just to continue all aspects of the project management. So that's obtaining permits, that's stakeholder collaboration and public outreach, doing regular presentations, making sure the web page is updated, responding to inquiries from the public and from local media outlets, working on the surfing conditions monitoring program, coordinating with the district staff, commissioners, and members of the community to identify and pursue opportunities for community involvement. It includes the remaining work that's necessary for obtaining the permits for the project. So we have the Coastal Commission permit approved, but there's still a number of things that we need to submit to the Coastal Commission before they're going to give us a notice to proceed on the project. That's things like a biological monitoring plan, et cetera. It's also working with the sanctuary and the Army Corps of Engineers, National Marine Fisheries Service, Regional Water Quality Control Board, and just finalizing all the loose ends and submitting inquiries for more information, that kind of stuff. Most of that work has been completed. We've done an extensive amount of unanticipated work in responding to questions and stuff over the past few years. I think we're over that, but this is a lot of the, tying up loose ends and that kind of thing. Project monitoring plans. So as we were just discussing, there's going to be a physical monitoring program where we actually measure things like beach width, profile, and that kind of stuff. So we've got a draft of that already. It's working with the agencies to get that approved and finalized before construction of the project. There's also a biological monitoring plan. So we need to work with the sanctuary. And these are things that, once the permits get issued, they say, you need to submit and get this approved before we'll give you a notice to proceed. These aren't things that have to happen before the permit gets approved. So biological and physical monitoring plan, finalizing those and getting them approved. Eelgrass mitigation planning coordination. So we've got this giant eelgrass mitigation project happening, and it has a ton of moving parts that need to be dealt with. We're working on getting the final plans approved right now by National Marine Fisheries Service, and then we need to get the engineering plans for the eelgrass specifically updated to reflect the final approved plans. There is the bid process. So preparing and coordinating the invitation to bids and collaboration with John Moran and the engineering team preparing those documents, hosting a site visit before, a mandatory, site visit of the contractors before the bid gets submitted. It's answering all those questions that come in. It's a very detailed project, so we're going to get a lot of specific questions as these construction companies start digging into their proposals and ask things about, logistics and stuff. That's all part of the whole bid process, right? There is the continuation of looking at funding sources and grants. That's been a pretty big part of, my task list over the past few years. And while we've got a few that are in the hopper right now we haven't heard back about. I think we're too late for construction grants, but there's still opportunity to get grants that can help pay for some of that ongoing monitoring and other aspects of the project. So, there's a few hours in there to work on that. And then just some general project managing tasks, work plans and schedule, and keeping everybody up to speed on everything at the district staff level, kind of managing the team of engineers and biologists and contractors who are working on the surveys. And then another big one is, I laid this out at the update last month, but there's a huge number of surveys and things that have to happen in the spring, starting around the April timeline. And that's going to take a lot of lining up, the companies that can do that, potentially putting out RFPs for those services, scheduling, coordinating with Harbor Patrol staff to make sure that they're aware when the work is occurring. So, those are kind of the main things. It's kind of just all aspects of finalizing the loose ends of the project to get us to the point where we can have an approved contractor and get the process started. I'm anticipating, probably minimum of 16 hours per week, 2 to 3 days a week over the next, 6 to 8 months working on this.
Okay. Tom, I think you had a comment.
Motion to authorize an amendment to the contract with consultant Brad Damitz for an amount not to exceed $38,400 for the interim project management, and approve an increase in capital expenditure appropriations of this amount to be funded by available working capital.
Okay, that was a motion, I take it?
That was.
Okay. Second. Okay, before we get into discussion on that, what I'd like to do is open it to public comment. If there's any member of the public here in attendance that would like to comment on this presentation. Okay, seeing none. Any further comments from the commission? I had one comment. What's our target date for getting the request for bid out? Or do we have a target date for that?
Target date is sometime early winter, maybe December timeframe.
Okay. Are the permits in line to have that a reasonable expectation to make that?
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable expectation given the current status of the permitting process and the status of the technical specifications and things that are underway by the engineering team.
Okay, and then that would allow a sufficient time to start to get the contractor on board by April or May?
Yep.
I assume that's kind of our expectation. Okay.
That's right.
Brad and I've already been putting together the invitation for bid,
Oh, okay.
all those documents, and Brad's pretty much got all the technical specifications for those documents. So it's just a matter of tweaking at this time.
Yeah. So really what we're waiting for,
Permitting and conditions.
sorry, John, to talk over you. What we're waiting for is the remaining permits to become available. And then there's a few items that we need from ESA, which is the finalizing of the technical specification. But everything else is pretty much ready to go, as John said.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Any further comments from the commission? Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Mateusz?
Aye.
Commissioner Slater Carter?
Yes.
Commissioner Domrat?
Aye.
President Zemke?
Aye.
I'd like to add one more thing before we let Brad go. Just my appreciation, Brad, for everything you've done for the district with regard to this project. Brad works tirelessly on this project, and actually, I know he doesn't, this amount that the board is project for Brad's continued support is a not to exceed amount. And Brad has been quite remarkable in his willingness to go above and beyond. And a lot of things he's done for this project, he hasn't even charged the district for. He's taken the project under his wing, which is quite a remarkable thing to do nowadays. He's actually been out during some of the, assisting in some of the eelgrass surveys, where they actually get in the water and look for surveys, or look for eelgrass to determine the amount of mitigation the district has to do. His relationship with all of the permitting agencies has allowed him to be an integral part in that, and they've been very much appreciative of everything he's done in that regard, which benefits the district insurmountably. So we appreciate everything you do, Brad.
Yeah, thanks a lot,
Thank
Brad.
you, John. I really appreciate that.
Okay. All right, that'll wrap up that one. Let's move along to the next discussion item, which is real property lease, Granada Community Services District. Julie, I think this is yours.
Thank you. So attached to this item two is a draft of a lease agreement between the Harbor District and Granada Community Services District for the lease of the third floor in this building. The key terms of the lease are 3-year term expiring November 30th, 2026. Rent at $4,600 per month with the annual inflationary increase. Common area use charge of $450 per month. And a security deposit is not required, and we do not have a security deposit currently. With that, staff recommends that the Harbor Commission approve the lease and authorize the general manager to sign. If you have any questions regarding the draft lease, I'd be happy to answer them at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any members of the public in attendance here that would like to comment on this item? Okay, seeing no comments, then I'll open it to commissioner comments.
I think it's a great lease, and I move that we approve the lease agreement by and between the San Mateo County Harbor District as landlord and Granada Community Services District as tenant, and authorize the general manager to sign.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, it's moved and seconded. Yes.
Can I offer potentially a change to that motion, which would, since it's not signed by the counterparty, there might be additional changes that come back from the counterparty, and perhaps as part of the motion, to avoid having to come back to the board, you authorize the general manager to make such changes as the general manager deems necessary prior to signing it.
Okay.
No, I'd rather have the board knowledgeable about any changes to any lease. So if GCSD.
Offer it up as a suggestion.
I appreciate that, but I believe the board needs to be fully informed on critical matters like this.
Okay.
So my motion stands.
One quick question I had. How many employees are normally housed or operate out of that office? Do you have any idea?
Good question.
I'm just
I usually see one person coming up and down on a regular basis,
I
but
believe there are two. One might be part-time. The general office manager is Hope Atmore, and general manager's main office is in Southern California, and he is very seldom on the coast.
Oh, okay. Do they use that room for meetings very often?
Yes,
What do they do? Okay.
they use it every other week, for the Mid-Coast Community Council.
Yes, that office is maintained by, or normally staffed with the assistant general manager and then the office manager. And they do host other community meetings, as Commissioner Slater Carter mentioned. And they host their own meetings up there, in their conference room.
Okay. Okay, any further comments? Okay, can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Slater Carter?
Yes.
Alright.
Yes.
President Zemke?
Yes.
Commissioner Mateusz?
Yes.
Okay. Moving along to item number 3 on discussions, Pillar Point Harbor Retail Center Roof Replacement
Not you.
Project. For bids. John, this is yours.
Yeah, this is in regards to our aged retail center at Pillar Point Harbor, an area there in the far west end above Mavericks Surf Shop, one of our retail tenants. The roof is sloping and is very, very poor condition. So we need to take action on replacing it prior, ideally, to this winter rains that are coming. So pursuant to a public advertised invitation for bid, with the board to consider authorizing the general manager to enter into an agreement with the low bidding construction contractor, Andy's Roofing Company, Inc., for the Pillar Point Harbor Retail Center Roof Replacement Project for an amount not to exceed $39,600 with a 30% contingency in the event there is a need for change orders due to unforeseen challenges or additional work found needed, and authorize the general manager to issue change orders up to the contingency amount, and approve an increase in capital expenditure appropriations of $51,480, which includes the 30% contingency, to be funded by available working capital. The Pillar Point Harbor Retail Center roof is over 30 years old, and the entire roof is in need of repair or replacement. But there's areas that need our action immediately, and those areas, based on professionals that we've had give a cursory look, need to be completely replaced. And we've determined that that's approximately 1,000 square feet. We won't know the full extent, but as our potential contractors that looked at the building themselves, bid on the repairs, this, on the same repairs, this contractor who we've used before believes that that damage to, or that portion of the roof to be able to be replaced for $39,600. However, they won't know fully until they remove the upper layer of the tar shingles and look at the underlayment, the underlying plywood and structural challenges. So I'd like the board to consider a 30% contingency so we don't have to immediately come back to the board for additional monies. Of course, the board, or the general manager and myself will be watching very closely and ensuring that any change order request is legitimate, and then anything over the 30% contingency, we would be coming back to the board for. There also may be other areas on the roof, once we've got professionals up there working, that they determine need to be addressed before the rains. So we would want to take action on that roof area, and we can hopefully be able to do a change order within this 30% contingency, so that we do not have to continually come back to the board, postpone work to continually come back to the board to ask for additional funding. We are keeping in mind, of course, that under board direction, we are moving, as our next agenda item will address, we are moving forward within the next few years to potentially replace the entire retail building. So we don't want to make too large of an investment, as I explained to the contractors that were bidding on the project. We don't want to do a Band-Aid, because it will be several years And of course, this western portion above Mavericks is in such poor condition that it was agreed upon that that entire area will need to be replaced, but we don't need to go necessarily replacing the entire roof of the retail building, because much of the membrane areas that are more flat with the membrane over it is still in good condition, relatively good condition. And the general manager also has paid very close attention to this and is working with the other tenants that over the years have made smaller improvements to their roofs and skylights, et cetera. The general manager has worked that out with them. So we're going to continue to work as a team with all of our tenants, but we want to have professionals up there looking and evaluating the roof, and we will make any corrections necessary to ensure that all of our tenants' assets that are protected by the roof are cared for in a professional manner.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Do we have any members of the public that would like to comment on this topic? Okay.
I have one comment, and in my recent experience, I've been learning a whole lot about construction. And I was just talking to one fellow, and he said, whatever construction you're involved with, be sure and get a performance and project completion bond. In case, even though this contractor has been around and is known to the district, if something were to happen, if he were to have a heart attack or something would happen to this company, unprojected. These are inexpensive in terms of hundreds of dollars, but if he can't or won't finish the job, then it protects the district's contract and investment in making sure this work is done how and when it had been signed on to in the contract.
That's a 100% agreed upon. You know, our legal team has professionally put together our construction contracts that we use, and there is performance bonds required. There was even a bid bond required as well.
Okay.
So I believe that's addressed, and maybe our legal counsel can look over it again for us quickly.
Please, because I didn't see it in this staff report.
No, it's in our actual, we haven't got them approved yet. Once it's approved, then our contract will be drafted. And our contract is a template, you know, that we just
Right.
enter in all the information for. But it's the same contract that we've used for all of our construction projects, and I believe the district is protected, as you suggest. But that is in the actual contract once we have it approved to enter into a contract with.
Well, please send me a copy, and
Yeah, sure.
with that commentary, I move approval of this small project.
Okay.
Well, I just want to say I do appreciate John's layout, because in the back of my mind, and I am by no means a roofing expert, but we're looking at a 5-year roof. We don't need a 50-year warranty roof. So I'm glad you're looking at that, and you know, maybe we're using duct tape instead of Gorilla Tape. I don't know which one, but yeah, there's got to be kind of levels of construction that we can look at that, yeah, it doesn't buy us a, you know, the Cadillac of roofs, but gets us, you know, to minimize risk for the tenants. So I appreciate
the Rolls-Royce Volkswagen analogy, but we are.
I was saying Cadillac.
Not that there's anything wrong with Volkswagen.
I was going to say,
That was the first thing I realized. I said, well, you know, 5 years, we're going to be tearing the whole thing apart. So,
But we're also mindful that, obviously, if it was possible not to totally replace this area of the roof, that's what we would do. But regretfully, it is in such poor condition that it is in need of replacement. And we're also mindful that that, as we'll be discussing in this next agenda item, that, all the best intentions in the world that we're going to replace the building doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to happen even within the next 5 years, 100% sure. So we're going to get it done professionally. That's our goal.
Tom?
Second to Commissioner Slater Carter's motion.
President
Yep.
Zemke, I just wanted to confirm for Commissioner Slater Carter that our bid documents do in fact include both a performance bond for 100% of the cost of the project as well as a payment bond.
Mr. Domrat?
Yes.
President Zemke?
Yes.
Mr. Matoush?
Aye.
Mr. Slater Carter?
Okay. Thank you, John. Let's move along to the next one, which is the Pillow Point Harbor Retail Center Replacement Project Update and Change Order 3 Conditions. John, this is yours as well.
All right, and we've got Jim Goring, our design engineering consultant, here to answer any questions the board may have and give us a project update on all the work that their team has done thus far. Let me just say that the board also, as the board's aware, make the public aware, the board had also assigned an ad hoc committee of Catherine Slater Carter and Virginia Chain Corrali, and those two commissioners have worked diligently in conjunction with the design engineering team, met multiple times. Also, our general manager has taken a very hands-on approach to this project, and we've our design engineering team has reached out professionally and held public meetings and reached out to all the stakeholders project as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jim Goring of Goring Estrada, who are our design engineering / permitting consultants. Go ahead, Jim.
Hi, Commissioners, and thank you for your time, and I'm enough to show you all the work we've been doing for the last step. So I'm going to start with a brief recap of the constraints and the things we've heard from the community for the site, and then, rather than show you all of the alternatives we've been looking at, walk through what was developed with the subcommittee based on our direction after the last meeting, which is this, what we've termed the hybrid scheme. So that is your site, as you're well aware. It's an old building. It's suffered from exposure. Its systems are aging. It's small. Its landscape consists of a very big sidewalk. I don't have to go through the issues that are challenging it. But that was our brief out the door, is seek for a way of upgrading or replacing this building on site. And as you know, there was extensive study of various site locations, and the brief is of terms. This is your site, mainly accessible from, well, almost uniquely accessible from Highway 1. There's a little stop sign indicator there to sort of give you a preview that one of the issues that the county planners have been looking at are wondering, as we study the traffic impact of this project, will there be a necessity to put a sign there? I noticed there's another large construction project going on between the highway and Harbor Village, and I'm curious if they were asked the same favor to study that.
I might add, the county gave a waiver to the Harbor Village shopping buildings when they asked for, as a condition of approval, a improvement to Highway 1. And then when it came time to complete it, they said, oh, no, it's not a problem. So it is in the record, and I don't think we should be bound by their waiver for the same developer that is doing the RV park. And it would be worthwhile for the district to do a records request to get all of those documents and read them carefully.
By the way, I want to thank Commissioners Chancarelli and Slater Carter for working with us in the last few months since the prior community hearing here to develop where we've arrived. As you know, there is, the building is sort of captured by surrounding parking and other developments. The views that the Coastal Commission and the county will be most concerned about are from public spaces along, or public access along Highway 1 and beyond, of course, as well as by adjacent developments. And we've heard a lot of input during the community hearings that there's concern about making the project too tall, too overwhelming. We're very well, that's in our heads with everything we've done on this project. Obviously, views from the site are not back up to the highway, but the ideal views are to the south, the east, and the west, and to the beaches adjacent, which are quite extraordinary. We've also been working constantly with the Coastal Commission to be very sensitive to the 2100 maximum sea level rise, high tide, high wind, flood event, which is indicated approximately by this blue line here, which currently is about 1.5 feet above the existing finished floor level of the retail building. And in the broadest terms, the project we're looking at now has evolved from really replacing the existing retail building to a scheme that originally out of the gate was designed to allow the possibility that it could be a staged project, retaining existing tenants on site, and then building one project, those tenants would move into that, and then building a second building. It can be pursued that way. It's quite costly to do so with a lot of time. And of course, staging two projects, it would be very expensive. So that's a decision that the board will make at some point, not necessarily right now. But the existing building is approximately 7,500 square foot. The proposed building, broken into two sort of two-story masses, at about a little less than 18,000 square feet. In simplest terms, the proposed building peaks up above the upper level, so appear to have the presence and massing of a single-story building from the north. And then as it steps down the site, there's 2 stories on the south. Whoopsie. That will preserve views towards the beach and the hills, and from the north will have a very minimal impact on views from the public access. In fact, one of the things that challenges the current project is that it's more or less invisible, and our goal is that it will continue to be more or less invisible, so marketing and public presence will still be an issue to be dealt with. The siting for the project, in order to make possible this staging strategy, moved one of the building, the eastern building, a little further north. So it's actually not on the footprint of the existing building. It incorporates the bathroom that's been built with some significant remodel to deal with the floor levels. And then because we're going back there, obviously there's one bar of parking that would be impacted. We envision the upper level, the northernmost bar of parking to serve probably the upper level tenants, would have a roundabout and a drop off. And then below those buildings, below that, I'll go describe that in another one, would be a large plaza, landscaped, with landscape features, gathering spaces, furnishings. That plaza, just the light orange portion of it, is approximately the same size as the existing long stretch sidewalk, I think 5,000 plus square feet, something like that. So we would anticipate that parking area, if it was chosen to be, the large double wide sidewalk or triple wide sidewalk, if it's deemed to be necessary to keep the parking, could be returned to parking and still have a really large and beneficial public plaza space. Floor plans are relatively simple. What we're trying to do is anticipate the separation of back of house and front of house for any commercial building. So we have two-stop elevators. One would be a utility elevator for taking food up and trash out. Trash would be taken to the left in this view, which is to the west. This is the lower level plan. On the westernmost, that is lefternmost side of the plan there, you'll see a trash room. So basically that would be taken care of there. The building, as the building interiors, we are sort of projecting here the number of tenants. Obviously the specific divisions will kind of fall to how tenant negotiations proceed and which tenants choose to be here and how much space they'll need. Some of the major partitions will be required for seismic issues and bringing plumbing down from above, but in general, what we're looking at in our scope is creating a sort of so-called warm shell, where the interiors would be developed on a tenant-by-tenant basis. We are showing incorporating the existing bathroom here, and I wonder if I can point on this thing. No. Anyway, oh, I can, okay. So there's the existing bathroom facility that actually turns out to be sized enough to serve this whole ground floor. We can't promise that we're going to save the entire value of the existing bathroom, because one thing that's very important in the scheme is we are raising the floor 18 inches or so. So we will also have to remove interior finishes and plumbing in that bathroom, lift everything up, put a new floor in. That's still considerably less expensive than scraping it to the ground and moving it elsewhere. Other aspects of this scheme well, on this floor, so that outdoor plaza is raised to meet both the county's master plan intent to all new development should meet the 2100 maximum projected sea level rise. Not maximum, but I think it's 0.01%, 0.02% predicted sea level rise, which is also the criteria that the Coastal Commission gives. So the other thing that does is it raises that public plaza significantly above parking. And it doesn't take much for you to feel that you're not in a parking lot. If you're 18 or 20 inches above that parking lot, sitting in a chair, you see over the cars. You'll know it's there, but it makes a huge, substantial difference experientially. The upper level is characterized by what we anticipate as two relatively large tenants, and then access from either above or below. From below, there are stairs that come up to shared decks, and from above, there would be a sort of cascading landscape to the parking area. We have not had contact with prospective tenants, so the interior layout of these is pretty conjectural. We put in bathrooms based on the size we know that code would require. We're anticipating tenants of this nature would probably want their own bathrooms, so each tenant space has bathrooms. And also each tenant space, we're showing each one with a sort of outdoor dining area with extraordinary views that are sort of would be leased to that tenant, we anticipate, because they are part of those spaces. They're adjoined, well, I can't point. So that's here on the east, it's about 480 square feet. Here on the southwest is also about 480 square feet. And then the shared plaza between the two would be a public space where there might also be pop-up tenants, or might just be more additional outdoor space. During our public open house and in our workshop, and also looking at the feedback we've got, we were encouraged to look very closely at the Princeton area, local areas around Half Moon Bay, and also down at Pescadero. And we heard repeatedly the sort of mantra, small, local, and funky, which we've embraced. I think that Princeton itself is a very busy area. It's kind of got a lot of energy around here, and it kind of, it is small, local, and funky. So this section explains our strategy of remaining small to the north, to be a relatively modest structure on the public side, and then taking advantage of the natural grading of the site as it goes down to allow us to have 2 stories of development, actually, but with the major exposure of those to the south and to the inner courtyard. And I expect all these are probably online. I think they may be required to be so. So you can see the access from above. People would walk to the patio and take stairs down and be part of the larger plaza area. You'll see through these presentations, we've been playing with 2 different roof forms. Mostly we sort of landed on a gabled one. This is a holdover from a flat roof scheme. This is approximately the existing view as you approach, actually, if you've just passed the turnoff to Johnson Pier Drive, or Pillar Point Harbor Drive. This kind of lays the buildings out in scale. Existing retail center is to the left. That big tree is actually there. The maintenance building or storage building is dead ahead, and the Harbor Village structures are on the right. And this shows the approximate scale of what we're proposing. The center area actually is lower than the existing structure. The 2 others, the side buildings are raised a few feet. I don't know the number exactly offhand, but when we're judging between these, I'd say they're about 8 feet higher on either side. And then we're proposing sort of, actually, let me step back a couple slides to that section. Oops. The other important aspect of this is since the northern half of the eastern building is going further north, there will be some excavation to create the lower floor from it. And we are recommending that the spoils of that be used on site to create a sort of single grade up to the building. So again, the massing of the building will appear as a single floor, not as 2 stories above grade. It's not 2 stories above grade in that area, but it just seems a much more gentle approach. And it's also best practices to try and have a net zero balance of cut and fill on any given site. As we go around the edges of the building, the sides of the building, it becomes a little bit more dynamic, a little more inviting, a little more active. This is a comparison drawing showing the height limit of a proposed buildings compared to the harbor villages in the background. They remain dainty, I think, in scale. This also shows relatively low eaves. I've forgotten, I think the interior eaves are below 10 feet in the inside space, which is relatively low for retail clients. Of course, is slope proof, so it gets higher as we go in. We know as we proceed further, we're going to have to deal with commercial ventilation issues for the kitchens and so on. We haven't really solved that other than we know it's an issue still. This is our sort of presentation of the character of the project facing south towards the harbor. It's much more dynamic, lots of windows looking out in that direction. At these large balcony areas, they are quite large. They're also roofed to make them usable more often in the year. Those big roof overhangs also can create sad, dark, shady areas where no one wants to sit. So we are looking at some ways of introducing natural light into them. The massing building on the right shows a large, very large round opening in the roof. That deserves more study. We really love it as an element. We're terrified of what seagulls will do to it. As we proceed further, we're considering glazing it, so it's really a big skylight rather than just a big hole. This kind of shows, this is a view looking at the amenities in the plaza. We've been asked, and I think it's a wise idea, to hold our consultants off until after this meeting. So we haven't had our landscape architect chime in on this much other than a sort of initial sketch ideas about, provide some raised places that might be used for performance or just to sort of differentiate the mass, leave most of it open for movable site furnishings or pop-up vendors or community uses. So that's how we've shaped it for now. We would love it to be paved in anything other than asphalt and concrete. Budget will drive a lot of this, as it would drive any commercial project. But you can see here that the scale and massing are broken down both by roof forms, by stairs that go upstairs, by recesses in the buildings, and as you'll see later, by material changes. We have a few views sort of walking you through the site here. This is the approach from the upper level parking area to this deck. Again, you see sort of modest buildings on either side. And our hope is, and this is important to develop as part of the design guidelines for tenants, is to have less a list of thou shalts and instead a longer list of thou shalt nots. And thou shalt not have rear illuminated plastic signage and banners on the walls, greater. They can be rear illuminated as long as the light goes sideways and not straight out. And we haven't discussed these. These are my sort of personal out the gate things. We would, in keeping with small, local, and funky, we would encourage individual tenants to be able to individualize their spaces within and without. So we're also sensitive to dark sky illumination. All lighting on the exterior of the building would be pointed down. That's another reason to discourage internally illuminated signage, except for neon, which is awesome. So I don't know how to get around that. And then there's accessible parking to the right of this sign, so the right of this view. So people who have parked in the accessible parking spaces in that upper parking area would have access via path coming around the right. As you approach that area, we're envisioning maybe there might be a wine tasting bar or someone could be selling ice cream, but there's enough space there for that upper plaza to actually be used for something other than getting to the two restaurants. It could be more community space. The restaurants could have overflow dining out there in the summer. We're showing large windows wherever we can towards the views. And of course, this high up, you can see that you basically see over the harbor master's office. And again, this shows seats as you wrap around the corner on the left. These are, excuse me. two study views showing the kind of idea of a flat roof versus a gabled roof. You know, the flat roof was basically an idea that sprung from when you're near the ocean, the most prominent thing you see is the horizon. And as long as it's not just a flat cube roof, it extends some, was a strong idea. We've sort of since reluctantly, but definitely fallen in love with the gable scheme. I think it's actually kind of a little bit more Princeton, and if we can pull off the same kind of ways of bringing light into the spaces, then we're excited to do so. And by the way, this also, well, so does this. This also shows about the extent of the raised plaza. It's not raised a huge amount. There would be accessible paths in at least two places up to that plaza level, and the edge would be characterized by a mix of planters, steps, possible small scale sitting areas. This also shows access to the tenant space around the east end, which just kind of working from memory of what's there now would be, you know, the Crab Shack and the seafood, Princeton Seafood Company or something like it, or some other tenant as may be. So I mentioned the elevated plaza. This also shows, you know, we will still have a sidewalk on the south side. It just won't be a 25-foot wide sidewalk. We anticipate, you know, giving back 18 or 19 feet of that for more parking. This scheme is almost parking neutral. And Teresa, if you turn your microphone on, 'cause you're going to need to correct me when I'm wrong. I believe we're close to parking neutral.
We're close, yes. We're minus 7 parking spaces, actually.
Okay, so that's the benefit of filling in the cars on that side. No one wants to see less open space, but wiping out that upper parking terrace would have a big impact otherwise. This is a view from the southwest deck serving that one large tenant looking back towards the east. And I think 90% of the time there, people would be looking south towards the ocean, but the view to the eastern hills is really quite nice. And we think actually in this condition, the plaza between you and the hills also adds to the view. I have to remember to look for these guys. This is one where we would also try if technical issues such as seagulls allow us to put holes in the roof. I think it would be an advantage to also, these are very deep decks. So that might be worth studying also. Please, Virginia, Catherine?
Skylights.
Skylights.
Seagulls are incredible, creative, and good problem solvers, and they can make themselves get through the most amazing small
yes.
holes to get. Can covers off.
The seagulls. Wow.
Seagulls.
Yeah. And we talked about skylights. We would probably recommend some sort of fritted glass or some glass with a pattern so that the pattern doesn't just become seagull poop. And that's a pretty common thing in situations like this. An art opportunity. And this is a view from the southeast plaza, again, mainly serving that restaurant, looking towards the southwest. Mavericks is out there someplace. Again, you can see big windows into the restaurant from here, so this deck doesn't block views from the restaurant. Some sort of skylight, views to the outside, furnished for the restaurant. Materials palettes are still being developed. Our intent and our desire is that the materials be what we would call genuine. So we have some Corten steel, which is metal that looks like metal. The lower areas where we have a retaining wall around the back would wrap forward a little bit. We would recommend those be board formed on one side and probably pneumatically placed concrete, which is a relatively inexpensive way of getting board formed. Shingles with the proper nails are not a bad finish in a maritime area. If we did something like that, we would like to see something like these Julia Morgan shingles, which are extra long and extra narrow and stained dark so that we kind of get a preview of the stain that would happen otherwise. But potentially metal siding in some places, otherwise mostly wood siding, except for where it's super vulnerable to being tagged for graffiti and so on. Sorry, and this is a scheme, again, we put various parts, various materials on both of these. The upper one obviously was the flat roof. The lower one would also have the skylight in it, just that this particular view, the roof is pointing at you, so you don't see it. And this This view, it kind of explores that materiality and some other issues on the upper plaza. We're recessing that corner as a way of sort of, once you get up there, you really get this sort of come in here invitation. The door on the left is an elevator, the passenger elevator that would go downstairs. Again, I think most of these issues were called out on another one, but this is just sort of taking that materials palette and not being afraid of some loud color in small areas, as again, probably as tenants will determine. This is a slightly alternate material palette. Mainly, this is the one that kind of shows some bright metal. Roofing, we're thinking of simple corrugated metal siding or corrugated fiber cement. And I think part of the design going forward will be to have a sit down and assess attractive, durable materials that are particularly durable in a harsh marine environment.
As you know, most malls require any tenant improvements, including color, to be approved by the landlord.
Right.
And I don't want to leave a false impression for anyone who reviews this meeting in the past that the district is giving up design and appearance controls.
Right.
We should follow the standard mall practices of determining where signs go, what colors are used, all of that stuff, because I have seen enough in my lifetime of what other people thought was attractive that was perhaps aesthetically challenged. And I think the district needs to have control of that.
We would encourage for most flexibility and creativity to have design review oversight and suggestions for design elements written into tenant leases. And we were even hoping on some of these that you see, I'm not sure which view it is. If you have a 10-year lease, that'll pay for pulling off a wall of shingles and reapplying it at some point. So if it's like painting on the building is something that happens in Princeton and something that happens in down south, Pescadero, all over, and Half Moon Bay. And it doesn't happen so much in malls. So that's the kind of thing we don't want this to feel like a Westfield development, although they've been getting better and better. So, but basically we want it to feel local. But I'm also agreeing. We want leases to definitely have a design review statement and, you know, list of please do this and please don't do this, or absolutely. And again, this is just sort of a recap of the issues there. You can see these deep porches, very large for outdoor space, tenant graphics encouraged, dark sky lighting required, and then potentially, you know, durable materials anywhere near some place where people can get to it. And then our schedule, I'm going to ask Teresia to jump in here because we've made some revisions to this based on recent contacts with California Coastal Commission and the head of San Mateo County Planning.
Hi, Teresia Funari here. So we've contacted the San Mateo County Coastal Commission in order to get this schedule that they're looking at. So first thing that we need to do for the entitlement process would be with the San Mateo County to go through the major development pre-application procedure. And this procedure will involve a public workshop at some point. And on the schedule, I noted it could be sometimes in December, the earliest. So upon receiving comments from that workshop, we will then be able to prepare for design review submittal for the county, as well as prepare submittal for the coastal development permit as well. But so what we were estimating for approval from the county would take 3 to 6 months, which would include the pre-application procedure, design review submittal, design review meetings. Also, there will be some grading permit that we will need to obtain from the county because the site work will be larger than 1 acre. And then for the coastal development permit process, it will take roughly 6 to 12 months A lot of that will also depend on the environmental study that we will receive. One thing that might trigger us to do the full-on EIR would be the traffic analysis. That's something we need. Yeah, that's actually something that we need to do as soon as possible, to see what the actual environmental process that we need to go through.
Just interject one thing here. The architectural team, without our consultants, we've gone way through schematic design where we are now, but we have not engaged consultants. So we don't have landscaping, civil, site lighting, and stormwater drainage design. All that's absolutely required for design review drawings. So that's why we had this sort of big window between now and the time we can submit for design review.
Right. Thanks, Jim. Overall, the coastal development permit process might take up to a year.
Teresa checked with them, by the way. One thing we changed is the Coastal Commission and the county communicate. So they're comfortable doing both of these more or less at the same time. We have to get, well, that's actually, how does that work, Teresa? Because the California Coastal Commission's application basically says, attach the approved county design.
Yes, we will basically submit incomplete application. And they won't issue the permit until we get those, the permit approval from the county.
Okay, great. Well,
done.
complete applications we're expert at, so that should work. Anyway, that is the status of where we are now. We started a project that was about 8,000 square feet. Now we're looking at something that provides much more public benefit and in addition, much more income space. It's approaching 18,000 square feet. We started looking at almost no site improvement. And I mean, if you included the sidewalk, which was a few thousand square feet, now we're touching 40,000+ square feet of site. So what we've come with you now, in addition to the design status, is a request for additional funds to fund the larger design, well, really through the end of construction. And with that, I thank you, and we'll take any questions that you have.
I'd just like to, before the questions start, I'd just like to make some things clear to the board. At board direction, the staff did put out a request for proposal for bringing on a design engineering consulting firm to look at potential sites for a new retail center, because our old retail center is in such poor old condition, or redoing or potentially building a new retail center at the current location, using some of the walls, or et cetera. But looking at the viability, feasibility of a lot of different options. So, and in that request for proposal, the scope was for a building roughly the same square footage as our current retail center. And that RFP resulted in the district determining that Goring and Straja were the lowest qualified bidder and best for this project. Their bid was approved for $595,368.40. And their efforts thus far, they have, of course, through public outreach and discussions and all the hard work that our ad hoc committee of commissioners have put in, have utilized or have determined that the best location is at the current place where our retail center is, but basically demoing the entire building and creating a double the size square footage new building. And thus far, all of their efforts in checking the feasibility for permitting and their design engineering efforts, the public outreach, et cetera, has resulted in utilizing $235,802.31 of the previously approved $595,000. And in those efforts, they have determined that roughly $50,000 were out of scope. Therefore, and the board had approved the general manager approving change orders up to 10%, so roughly the 50 grand that's already been spent. But again, we've only used 235,000 of the previously approved 595,000. So we do still have a lot of monies that the board has already approved to be used for design engineering on this project. However, because the project is going in a direction of doubling the size, and we now know, because Goring and Stranja has informed us, that they anticipate the design engineering, entitlements, construction support, costing the district an additional $784,689, $869, making the total design engineering for the project being $1,376,704 instead of only $595,000. The general manager believed it prudent for us to, of course, and the ad hoc committee wanted us to bring it back and inform the board and the public where we're standing if we continue going in the direction that we are going now. So, in short, instead of $595,000 for design engineering, entitlements, construction support, we are informed it's going to be $1.3 million. And Goring and Stranja has also, based on this design direction we're going now, done a rough engineer's estimate saying that the total, or concluding that the total construction cost will be an additional 11.9 million. So, yeah.
Very rough. That we didn't engage a cost estimator. We looked at how many square feet of demolition, construction, grading, and we threw the architect's best guess per square foot at it. That said, it's probably within 20% plus or minus.
So we've got, that's a good point. So we've got a rough estimate, like I said, of 11.9 for construction of this design direction we're going now. And also, based on my experience, I will say, I want to make it clear to the board and the public that the 1.3 estimated for design engineering may quite likely change. If we end up having to do an EIR, do more extensive compliance for permitting, et cetera, we can't obviously hold Goring and Stranja to that 1.3 million. So the project has significantly gotten larger, and we need to make sure that the board fully understands that and is able to ask Goring and Stranja further questions here today, and then direct the staff on how we want to proceed. We are asking today that the board approve an additional $784,869 to continue the design engineering entitlements for this project. I would also like to, at present, for the questions from the full board or the public, give an opportunity to the design engineering ad hoc committee, and we have today Catherine Slater-Carter. Virginia Shankarelli is not here today. Did you have anything to add?
I have, yes, I do have something to add. I think enlarging the project is a good plan. I think in the long run, I have noticed construction only gets far more expensive. So putting in an adequate sized structure to meet future needs is, I believe, good economics, but I am concerned and would like to have the Finance Committee review this, not only this project, but given our closed session items on land acquisition and so on, the overall financial standing of the district before we commit another $700,000. We may need to step back and ask to have this redesigned such that it's easily expandable, but not built all in one step. It depends on what the finances of the district recommend. And that, I know, is Director Jane Corrales and my joint opinion on this, since I come with a business background and she comes with a finance and investment and business background. So we both tend to agree on knowledgeable decisions based on conservative financials. And so I would ask to postpone this until it can be reviewed by the Finance Committee. I got a notice from, a question from Melanie about when we could have a Finance Committee meeting. And I think we should have it very soon so that we can put this on our next agenda. I don't want to drag out decision-making, but I also think that the board needs to be fully informed on the impacts of all of these financial decisions. So that's my humble opinion.
Yeah. John, do you have anything else?
Yeah, I would just add to that, because of the discussion and the significant scope increase, that is why we're bringing it back to the full board to consider, because at present, we have asked Goring Straja to totally put the brakes on, not to, as he has suggested, not to engage more of his consultants, et cetera. So that's where we're at now, until further board direction today, which may be for us to continue with the brakes on until after a finance committee, et cetera. No matter what the direction is, that's where we stand now, is the brakes are on the design engineering at present.
Well, and I would like for the Finance Committee to then inform and keep the whole board informed on what we discover in a more closely investigated view, but to be able to give our opinions to you folks. George?
Through your mentorship of myself and these kinds of things that are going on, I think you answered the question. And I'm hoping you guys looked at this, and I'm sure you probably did. And that would be kind of it's more than just the 700,000, because then we're talking about construction costs that's over double. So do we have kind of what the market will bear in terms of the size? If we build this thing that's now 2.5 times bigger, will we be able to fill it with enough people that over a certain amount of time, there's payback? I mean,
Let me just jump in and just say.
That's a really good question.
Yeah, let me just jump in. Yeah, let me just jump in and say that part of the 50,000 in change orders that the general manager has already approved was for a survey, if you will.
Market analysis and feasibility study.
Take place. So maybe Jim can talk about that real quick.
is that the market analysis of this bigger structure that we're now talking about, or is it?
Market analysis of your site and what it could bear, and ultimately, I don't want to misquote it, but you have that document available, which your finance committee should absolutely review and use in their discussions. And when she was doing her study and we were telling her the size of the building as we were designing it, she basically said, "Why are you only doing that? I mean, your site is extraordinary, and the key is to keep all of its qualities without turning it into a Westfield Mall, but still maximize return for the district."
They came to the site twice as well. I met with them.
Okay.
I think just my observation over the last 40 years of living on the coast is, particularly the Harbor District has gotten more and more public demand. There's a lot of vacant retail space in malls and even on Main Street in Half Moon Bay. But the harbor is a draw in and of itself. The number of people who came to the Mavericks Fest, you guys were there, you could see how many people were there and enjoying it. And that was the second only. Once we're able to reopen the commercial in the existing buildings and have a big announcement and so on, you're going to see that place just packed again.
What I'd like to do now is open it to public comment. If there's any members of the public in attendance here that would like to provide a comment at this time, I'd give you the opportunity. Yes, if you could just, I want you to come up to the podium and just state your name.
Michelle Westendorf, the owners of Catch and Pelagic over at the harbor. I guess I would just like to comment that while I think this building is amazing and I want to see growth, I also would encourage the board to maybe wait until we open up and you see what the new team is doing to do all the new plumbing and electrical that we've put in, that we've had to put in based on county permission. But also to see what, like Catherine Slater just said, to see how many people that come and what the budget's going to be for the next couple of years, and does it really bring people in? Because as owners of Jetty Wave, we have done the same thing where we've opened up this new building, we've done amazing things to it, outside, inside, and the people aren't coming. And so I would encourage you, as much as the harbor's a bigger draw than we are back in the, back nine of Princeton Harbor, if you will, I would just encourage you to really look at this, because it's scary for business owners that are just 2 blocks away, that we're not seeing what we built, they're not coming. And why are they not coming? Because we've got weather issues. Do we need bigger space inside? Of course we do. But we also want to be outside, and how do we cover the outside? So these are things that we're all learning as owner-operators, and being on the coast here for now 25 years. I want to see growth, but I also want to be smart about it. And there's some things that I really feel like we're missing in the harbor to bring those people in. And I don't know what it is. But before we go and spend all this money, or $1.3 million, and more money to give to people to figure out what they want to build, let's see what we've built now and if it will increase the business, because we're seating outside. We put a couple more seats inside. And let's just see, and give us just before you fork out all this money, give us a couple of years of numbers to give you commissioners to say, is it worth to build this? I love what you're building. I love what you've created. I'd love to see it grow, but really, how much can we grow with traffic, and all that good stuff. So that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Commissioner comments? George?
That was exactly my point. If we build it, will they come? And if we build it double the size, will we be able to maximize or get profit out of it? I like the idea of a phased kind of construction, where you build a portion of it, and as growth happens, we can then go to that next phase and build another one. But, I think that's where we're going to have to look at all those.
Yeah. And I think the process we've gone through has been very useful, and I'm really excited about the design. It really is very, very intriguing. The one concern I do have is if we go too far with the design and then let it sit for 6 years, are the agencies going to say, oh, no, you need to do this or change that? Or what kind of entitlement, if we spend that $1.3 million, and then it sits on the shelf for 3 years, 5 years, and then the agency, since then we need to change this or change that. So I don't want to be in the situation of having anything too complete before you get to the point where you're actually ready to start sticking a shovel in the ground. So that's kind of I really enjoy seeing what you put together, and I think it was a very useful step to go this far, but I'm starting to feel hesitant about going a huge further. Yep.
That figure represents design team effort through the end of construction. What you may discuss is
Right, and that,
in a position to make decisions without having a year and a half.
right, and the entitlements, you've been on planning commission, so you know what the entitlement phase is, and then a lot of things don't necessarily progress after that as expected, and I would just be in favor of getting it maybe to that entitlement phase, but not thinking about going a lot further. Tom?
I'd like to remind everyone that the Harbor District has hundreds of millions of dollars of plans sitting in various boxes of things that have been designed and never constructed.
Right.
I, for one, before I was commissioner, I said that entire row has to go. It's outdated, it's old, it doesn't serve its purpose. Anyway, I look forward to moving ahead on this and adding in a responsible way.
Yeah.
I think visibility, having visibility and location are two of the biggest drivers of business. And that's why malls are successful, because they do have CAM charges that includes mall advertising. And it's very hard for a single location to drive business, no matter how excellent it is, to drive business in and of itself. I wish the businesses in Princeton would get together and hire an ad agency who could bring traffic and get people just coming to the location. And I think that's the hard thing I learned, having been offered quite a few McDonald's restaurants and turning them down because they didn't have good locations. And having grown up in real estate, there's the three most important things in a business are location, location, location. And fortunately, the Harbor District has the location, and I do believe that depending on the outcome of the negotiations, if we are able to acquire the sites that we're discussing, which are on our closed session announcement, so it's not a secret, we will be able to drive traffic that way. And with the local businesses, for them to rent space for signage so that they can become better known to the traffic that's going by. Highway 1 has crazy traffic of everybody going by, but they're looking for what they're aware of, like downtown Half Moon Bay. And I keep going, no, go to Princeton. You know, there are so many great little places in Princeton that you would just love. And there's the park close by, and guess what? There's parking. So I think advertising is an important thing, but I think the first and most important thing for the district is to look at our overall financial obligations and how we're going to pay for it, and what, if there's limits on that, what we can pay for.
I would kind of agree with that. I think there's a number of things which are kind of a moving target right now in finances, between the possible acquisition of property. The big question in my mind, how much is the Surfers Beach sand restoration project really going to cost when we get there? And we do have a large capital amount now, but that could disappear quickly. And I don't want to be in a position where we're we start running into our reserves.
Well,
So-
it can disappear quickly one way and costs can double easily
Right,
the other
so, I
way.
mean,
Okay.
Having watched a number of public works projects, I kind of mentally just double up what I'm considering it. Because when I got started on the sewer district pipeline was $100 a foot, now it's $500 a foot. Granted, it's $500 a foot over 20 years, but that 400, that quintupling of the price over 4 or 5 years just makes prices almost unaffordable for major projects that are badly needed.
We're not going to move forward on this. Perhaps we could take up the next issue for the people that are sitting here.
Yeah, you know, is it the pleasure of the committee here to kind of refer this to the finance committee for some additional
Please.
thinking? Is that, okay, I think.
And then with the intent of putting it on our agenda for next
Meeting, okay.
Sounds good.
All right,
That's not too much of a burden on staff, is it, to throw those numbers, not throw, to compile those numbers in a logical fashion so that we can distill them and bring them back to the board as part of the next presentation?
That's fine, we can do that.
Yeah, we'll just have to, obviously, be able to organize the finance committee between now, the finance committee meeting between now and then us having time to prepare something for the next board meeting. Job in getting us with all the public outreach and all of the meetings that we've had, and analyzing all of the different potential sites and determining, I believe, that this is the best site, and coming up with, going back to the analogy of Volkswagens and Rolls-Royce, coming up with a Rolls-Royce alternative for a, for a.
I was going to say, I think, and I have
This
used
along?
this
Yeah.
analogy, I love car analogies. When WSD was buying the water district and I was campaigning for it, I promised people it would be a Chevy. The key at that point in time, the engine fires up and it gets you where you're going. Not the most comfortable, except for the 55s, of course, not the best body style, but that's my own personal aesthetics. But just, we're not going to be trying for a Rolls Royce. We want a good, solid Chevy, maybe a good, solid Chevy pickup truck. 1969 kinds of Chevys that just kept running and running and running.
What I was getting at is more just, I guess we have doubled the size or the square footage. So we're going with a square footage of maybe a Rolls Royce, whether I think the aesthetics of Rolls Royce as well. I think it's all very top tier, if you will. And that's probably the direction we want to go. But as the reality of finances may find, and hopefully we'll have direction from the finance committee with regard to being able to advise the board on a recommendation for how we're going to move forward with the project. I agree 100% with Commissioner Matoush, as well as I know the general manager does. I can speak for him if he's not on still, but we all want that old building replaced, and we do not want the $230,000 efforts that we've paid for now with Gorgon and Straja and all the hard work that their team and our ad hoc committee team and the public that have been involved in this to just sit in a box somewhere and nothing occur. That said, we did have also from restaurateur Michelle's discussion, I think, is very rational to consider as well.
Absolutely. I will say to Tom's point, I remember when there was a project, I think you were probably here, John, that the board had approved to put in a teak bathroom down here. Teak with skylights, so it could be lit inside for 24 hours, and it was going to be stone and marble and granite. And I remember going, really? And it was fully not engineered, but it was at the fully ready to be engineered design point by the time some of us on Midcoast Council took a look at it. And I mean, it was a waste of money to have such a grandiose scheme. So some of those plans were very wisely put in the box in the back over there.
Okay, I think we've reached a conclusion on this, and I want to thank the commissioners for the comments, and also Mr. Goring for a great presentation. I really found that very helpful. So, okay, we'll move along to item number 5, lease Pelagic Restaurant Group, 1 Johnson Pier, Half Moon Bay, California. Jim, this is yours.
Afternoon, Commission. Thank you, President Zemke. This item refers to the lease for with Pelagic Restaurant Group to lease parcels 1, 2, and 3 of the current retail building at Pillar Point Harbor. I met with this, as you know, I met with the board in closed session, got direction on the lease, and went back to Pelagic, and with legal, we have developed a lease that's within the parameters the board gave me to negotiate the lease. Beyond what's in the report and the attached lease, there's not much more I can add, but it was working with Pelagic on this lease was, I hate to say pleasant, but it was a good interaction between Pelagic Restaurant Group and the district in developing this lease. And we look forward to working with Pelagic into the future in developing their business and encouraging it to grow. That's my report on this, unless you have specific questions.
Are members of the public here that would like to speak on this topic? Okay. Commissioner comments? Catherine?
Jim, I want to make sure that we can continue to invite and accommodate food trucks. This lease doesn't preclude the district doing that with some sort of exclusivity clause, or I realize they have the exclusive rights to what they're leasing, but in terms of the district grounds and facilities, I think that we need to have a non-exclusive, and I think it should be specifically stated in the contract that the district will be inviting food trucks into the area.
It doesn't, the contract as drafted right now does not give exclusive rights to the tenants on any other piece of property within the district on what we can and cannot do. And depending on, the atmosphere, depending on the events, just like Mavericks events, they bring in food trucks and drink trucks for the event. That kind of activity will continue and not be prohibited by this lease.
And what about our Friday and Saturday and Sunday food truck tenants?
We can try to continue with that. We've already put a limit on that. The last weekend that the food trucks were there were September 25th. And we did not get a very positive feedback from the food truck operators that they got enough business to make it worth their while to make it a permanent station. That may change depending on the restaurants and how many people start coming back to the harbor, especially in 5 years when the new building gets built. But I don't see, but we can continue to look for having that Food Truck Friday events that we did while the restaurants were closed. But again, the lease itself does not prohibit the district from doing Food Truck Fridays or any other event the district deems in line with our mission statement.
And is that in the contract?
It's not stated in the contract. It's that they have any right to exclusivity. The lease does not give them the power to say no. But as a tenant, we'll definitely work with them if we do move forward.
Well, yeah, that makes all the sense in the world. I just want to make sure that some,
There is no affirmative clause. It's a lack of a clause.
right.
And if the board so wishes, I can work with General Counsel and Pelagic to add a clause if the board directs.
I think keeping the district out of hot water is always a good plan, and to keep things understood. And so I would like to see such a clause added, because it leaves it up to, it gives the harbor district the discretion, then the tenants are notified, and I can actually see it as an opportunity for the tenants, because people might be able to afford the food in the food truck and then buy a beer, come and buy a beer or some wine or something, which the food trucks can't do. So I would like to see that clause in there.
That's,
I guess can we amend this motion to allow the general manager to work with legal to add that component? But then we can approve that based on giving him the permission to go forward with that. Then it doesn't have to come back to the full board. Catherine, you?
I will agree to that.
Jim, does that make sense?
Does that make sense for you?
Yes, I can work with General Counsel and with the tenant on developing a clause that we can all agree to.
Right. If there are no other comments, I'll entertain a motion to approve the lease with that stipulation.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. We approve the Pelagic lease as stipulated. Can we have a roll call, please?
Excuse me, Commissioner Zemke, the motion, does that include the authority for the general manager to make that change?
That was my understanding.
Yes, I think that's the intent.
Okay, I just want to be clear that the motion covers that when the board votes on it.
Yeah. Okay, can we have a roll call?
President Zemke?
Yes.
Commissioner Mateusz?
Yes.
Commissioner Slater Carter?
Yes.
Commissioner Domrat?
Yes.
Zoom protocols during public meetings. Jim, do you want to kick us off?
Yes, again, thank you, President Zemke. This issue has been developing over the last 4 to 5 weeks in the Bay Area. And it seems to be limited to the Bay Area right now, because I've talked to several people down here in San Diego from all over California, and they're unfamiliar with this problem with Zoom. So, or with any platform, not necessarily just with Zoom. But recently, in the last 5 or 6 weeks, local entities such as Pacifica and other communities have been during the public meetings, the public has been calling in and during the public comments, making extremely vile and racist comments during their 2 to 3 minute speech. And under the Brown Act, you cannot necessarily limit it because of the content of the speech, based simply on the content. Pacifica had 10 members of the public in a row take their full time and just spewed racial issues and everything else that were completely inappropriate for a public meeting and unrelated to the agenda itself and what the work of Pacifica was doing. Under the Brown Act, you can't limit them just because of the content. However, there is another option. That option is to deem the speech disruptive. And then once it's ruled disruptive, then you have the possibility of turning off the microphone, but you have to listen to it first, and then you have to decide if it's disruptive or not. 2 cities, it's my understanding, Pacifica and Half Moon Bay, have adopted a system where the mayor is going to give a warning, or another member of the council will give a warning at the beginning of the meeting that the racial comments or public comments will be deemed disruptive, and then allow public comment. And then if somebody gets on and does the same thing with the unacceptable racial comments, somebody on the staff would have to deem that speech disruptive, or provide a warning before, provide the first warning to the individual, and if the individual then continues to speak, cut him off or her off. But that puts a lot of weight on who's going to define hate speech and what is hate speech. And hate speech means different things to different people. Some speech is clearly hate speech. Some speech is questionable hate speech, depending on where you sit and where you come from. So I don't think the district should be in the business of defining hate speech. When we hear it, we'll know it kind of attitude, or run the risk of having somebody sign on and make those kind of comments, and we have to sit there and listen to it as a board. And again, we'd be broadcasting it over Zoom. What I'm recommending to the board on the Zoom bombing and to prevent it is just to return back to the normal way we did public meetings before COVID-19. And if you wanted to make a public comment, you would either do it in person in the board meeting or submit it in writing. Matter of fact, we have 2 members of the public, Mr. Ibarra and Mr. Olam, have both submitted public comment, and those comments have been provided to the board, and their comments in full have been attached to the agenda online if people want to go see those public comments. But again, if the board supports this idea of, or my decision to suspend remote comments, we're simply moving back to hosting board meetings as we did in, say, January of 2020. And that will prevent this from happening to us, and we don't have to try to define what is hate speech and what is not hate speech, and what is disruptive and what is not disruptive, which I recommend we do not get in the business of doing. Beyond what I provided in the report and all the newspaper articles that were attached, that was my decision to change it on the agenda, and why we should not accept virtual public comments during our board meetings. Pending any questions, that's my report.
Okay. We have no members of the public here, so I will not accept any public comments, but open it to the commission for discussion. You want to start it off? Do we know, is Is there any possibility that whoever the Fair Political Practices Act Commissioner would be aware of this problem or thinking about how to react to this problem?
Answer?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, so there's two different issues. There's the Brown Act, which just requires open public meetings. It also has a provision that specifically prohibits a public agency from stopping criticism of elected officials of a legislative body. But then there's also the First Amendment, and that's in the US Constitution. And that's where a lot of this comes from. So I don't know that there's anything that the FPPC could do. And they're mostly looking at conflicts of interest and things like that. Because the real issue here is, unlike the Zoom bombing incidents, as Jim described really well in his report, unlike the Zoom incidents that occurred at the beginning of COVID, where people were just taking over the system, this is instances of people using the time for the public to speak, to say things that they believe to be true. And that's what Jim's highlighting is, now, if the district's going to continue to allow that and then decide in the future whether or not something is, disruptive enough to mute the speaker, now the district's having to draw lines about what is permissible speech and what's impermissible speech. And at this point, it doesn't look like there's people enforcing the rights of these folks, but you don't know how this is going to evolve over time. And the district could make a decision that somebody disagrees with. And at that time, maybe the district would find itself defending a challenge on First Amendment grounds.
Okay, well, as much as I hate to be viewed as stifling public comments, I think probably this is, for the time being, maybe the acceptable position to take. I know I know that we have been criticized simply because we have our meetings perhaps at an inconvenient time for some members of the public, but I think that we have provided opportunities for submission of comments ahead of time, and we do post the objective is to post the agenda on the Thursday before the meeting, which allows enough time for the public and they have access to all of the materials that the commission has, to review those, to put their thoughts together and put their thoughts in writing and email it to the staff, which then would communicate it to the commissioners. So I think that there is still that viable way of getting the input from the public. Or there is also still the ability for the public to show up in person as well.
History of this board with some comments that board members have received by email justifies this particular action by the board. I think that there are members of the public who have taken advantage of their point of view, which had nothing to do with the board members or the board or the actions of the board or anything else, and were extremely disturbing. And I'm sure they're private, personal matters for the board members who received them. But again, I do believe that this is an appropriate action to take.
Yeah, it's happening many different places, a lot in the media, local medias, at the city council meetings of the city of Pacifica. I think we're seeing it happening many places, not only in the state, but all over the country. And I think technology in the future will be able to figure out maybe a better way to handle it. But I think I have to agree with Jim. I mean, it's not our job to decide at this point what is and shouldn't be done. So something like that may come in the future. So I guess I'd like to entertain a motion, if that's
Sure.
Okay, to protect the integrity of the board meeting and allow board to conduct the business of the district, confirm the decision of the general manager to suspend public comments by Zoom, at least temporarily or in the interim, till something else better comes up.
I was going to say, why not just add until further notice?
Until further notice, thank you.
Okay.
I will second that.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Mathush?
Aye.
President Zemke?
Aye.
Mr. Damrat?
Aye.
That moves us to the closed session, which I understand is no longer necessary. Jim?
I was hoping to have an update and get further direction from the board based on that update. We're still working with the sellers, so I'll be coming back to the board asking most likely for a special meeting to discuss the update that I hope to get, and then get further guidance from the board at that time. But today's closed session is premature.
Brings us to future agenda items.
After the finance committee, I would like to have a discussion on district finance for vis-a-vis the construction project and overall finances, since we're near the halfway point anyway of the budget. Not quite, but getting there quickly.
The other topics for future Monday? Well, we look forward to the great guidance from our finance committee.
I will have fun.
Okay. I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Oh, then there was a second.
Seconded.
Okay.
Aye.
Okay. We have a roll call on that.
Commissioner Mathush?
Aye.
Commissioner Slater Carter?
Yes.
Mr. Damrat?
Aye.
Aye.
So is it a tradition on this board for the chair or the president to call for?
Recording stopped.
He did.
No, because
Is it?
other